Throughout the early 1960s, the United States was faced with a question it failed to answer over a century prior. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, the practice of forced slavery was officially ended. However, there was much uncertainty in terms of what to do next. For many slaves, their newly established freedom didn't actually mean a better life. Without the ability to read and write, a stable job, or any form of education, many actually stayed with the people who enslaved them. For those who did choose to seek out a better life, they were faced with the creation of separate but equal facilities. The belief of such a system was that white and African American citizens would receive the same treatment while still being separated from one another. We now know that this was far from the case, and that African Americans were treated as being second-class citizens below their white counterparts. Over 100 years later, the question was being posed again. Would the Constitution honor the claim that all men are created equal? The most famous events of the civil rights movement are likely immediately recognizable to most of us. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. In 1963, the famous March on Washington occurred, in which Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. And in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, which legally outlawed segregations in schools, workplaces, voting booths, and other public spaces. So after that, things were okay, right? A clear precedent was set that stated discrimination was unlawful and constitutional values were upheld. That's how things were presented to me in elementary and middle school, and I was left thinking that racism was solved and that any further discrimination was simply the result of hateful people with outdated beliefs. As a child especially, it's easy to have such a naive belief, but the truth tells a different story. Racism wasn't over, far from it. If anything, for each step taken forward during the period of the civil rights movement, 2 steps were taken back. Despite the public successes of the civil rights movement, behind the scenes, things were far from over. A counterintelligence program, termed COINTELPRO, sought to undermine black activists and movements, deeming them too nationalist and extreme. Given the time period, anti-communist sentiments were at an all-time high, and there was a genuine fear that the United States government would be overtaken by such movements. The program, which launched in 1956, was created under the belief that communist sympathizers could be hiding in these civil rights groups. What's especially shocking is that this program operated in an official capacity until 1971, when it was exposed to the public and ultimately ended. Keep in mind, this is after all of that civil rights legislation was passed. We'll never know exactly the true extent of the program, but we do know that mass surveillance and public campaigns to paint activists as violent and extreme did take place. Some of the more publicized actions of the program involved uncovering personal information about MLK Jr.'s affair and using it as blackmail, mapping out the apartments of notable civil rights leaders, and attempting to discredit some of the largest activist groups of the time. I know for myself that these government interventions are real because they happened to my own grandmother as well. She's not even African American, but when speaking to her about this topic, she told me that she received visits from government agents back in the 60s, asking about her involvement in such groups simply because she supported the cause. If government officials were questioning everyday people about their involvement in civil rights groups, imagine the kind of treatments that the leaders and organizers of these movements faced. From the knowledge we do have, we know that the harassment perpetrated was invasive and definitely went against several constitutional rights. Beyond government intervention, other public systems, the same ones designed to help and protect us, have also worked to undermine civil rights. The effects of deliberate choices such as redlining are still felt to this day, especially in large urban areas. Redlining was the practice of marking certain city sections on a scale from best to worst to determine things like city planning initiatives and funding. While in theory these rankings should have been conducted based on how good it was to live there and the quality of the neighborhood, we can observe from maps of the time that surveyors often rated neighborhoods based on things like minorities in the area, socioeconomic status of people living there, and often you can even see several direct comments stating that a neighborhood may be more dangerous or less desirable based on the racial groups that were living in that area at the time. As a result of these actions, many cities have massive wealth discrepancies even to this day, especially in places like the Bay Area and Orange County. So all of this begs the question, where do civil rights stand today? The answer, like most social causes, is somewhat uncertain. Broadly speaking, more of the population is aware of racism and discrimination as an issue. However, it does still occur, especially in places with a past connection to segregation and slave ownership. Through presidential and cabinet changes, recent administrations have gone about addressing the topic of DEI in various different ways. New laws are constantly being created and overturned, so it's difficult to gauge where things are in a legal standing. Despite all of this, Many people continue to advocate for equal rights and opportunities all the time, and it seems that the spirit of the people still exists today, even 60 years later. As a result of all this, it's hard to say where things will stand 10 or even 5 years from now. What can be said for certain, however, is that the push for civil rights will still be continual and ongoing. And just like in the past, people in the present and future will continue to advocate for what they believe in.